Hi, I'm Rosie. I'm the bookseller.
And I'm Gia, I'm the professor.
And we have never actually worked together at Readers Books, but we totally would if we could. Readers Books is a small, independent, new and used bookstore in Sonoma, California. And it is just one of the best places you can imagine working. And I personally think one of the best places you could go to buy a book. And we have been doing a series of conversations between us about the books that have changed our lives and the way that books affect us in general. But we thought we'd start this new little short series where we just recommend one book that you might like that could work for a friend or a relative or a child or more or less anyone. And today's book is The Parker Inheritance. This book is written for middle grade, that's 8 to 12. And it's this great sort of overarching mystery that connects both the now and the past in South Carolina. And it's about a kid who has to go to her grandmother's house. Her grandmother's recently passed, and she's spending the summer there and just kind of trying to figure out what to do, and finds out that there's a mystery that her grandmother never solved that is somehow connected to the history of the town itself. It's got all the great elements of a mystery for kids, but it also has a perspective that a lot of people, especially in my area, haven't really heard much from. And it gives you a good amount of history while still being a lot of fun. The story behind this book that I find incredible is one day I mentioned it to Gia, saying, "Hey, maybe your husband, who at the time taught middle school in North Carolina, maybe your husband will like it for the kids." And she took me up on the idea and read the book.
Yeah, I was about halfway through and I realized that I thought it would be the perfect book actually for my intro to literature classes. Part of the reason why it's such a good book for anyone who is learning more about literature and learning more about history is it does a really seamless job of alternating perspectives and alternating timelines, and kind of weaving together a lot of different perspectives in a way that ultimately is very complex. Part of the reason why we can't really tell you this story is it's very complex. There are a lot of layers, and there's a lot of characters. And I thought it would be exceptional for my introduction to literature class because it takes place so close to where most of my students are from. The majority of students I teach are from North Carolina, and North Carolina and South Carolina don't get mentioned in books very often. And I wanted to pick a book that was closer to my students' experience than books that are set elsewhere, right? Because a lot of my students are not big readers, all very busy with their own lives and majors. So I thought it'd be really good to have something that they could kind of latch on to and understand. Lo and behold, I've had a lot of success teaching this book. And every single time I teach it, students are hooked. They love the mystery. They love trying to figure out how this is going to end and who is responsible for what. They love trying to get me to divulge details. They're always trying to get me to spoil the ending. And it was while we were reading this book that I had one of the best moments I've ever had teaching. One of my students came up to me after class, and he was a great guy. He was a fine writer, but he was definitely in the running for class clown. And he really enjoyed being involved with discussions, but didn't always have something literary to offer. He often relied on his own experience and added in lots of jokes and stuff like that. So he was a joy to have in class, but he was not a big reader. But he came up to me after class and he said, "This book is amazing. I haven't read a book since middle school. And I finished this book and I immediately picked up another book because I was so excited about reading. But I love it. It introduces lots of really good topics surrounding race and the history of racial tension in the United States. It covers passing, which is actually a really difficult topic still to talk about. And it talks a lot about civil rights. My students often feel like the civil rights happened 100 years ago. So this book is a really, really helpful reminder that civil rights wasn't that long ago. And that there's still lots to think about and to talk about when it comes to civil rights in this country. And I just think it's an exceptional book, and I think everybody should read it, honestly.
I think something that a lot of people forget about children's books is that that kids have a lot more ability to read something hard than we often think that they do. Just tells a story exceptionally well and is about topics that are exceptionally difficult to talk about. So if you want a kid to learn something, they have to actually enjoy what they're reading and what they're learning. So I think one of the interesting things about this book is it actually mentions another mystery called the Westing Game, which won the Newbery in 1978. And in reading it again as an adult, I read it as a child, but reading it as an adult, there's a lot there that I currently would be surprised to see in a kid's book. There's a stock market, there's a will, all kinds of things that I was perfectly capable of handling and reading as a kid that I might look at now as an adult and a book buyer and say, well, maybe kids won't want to read that. And I think we need to stop underestimating our kids. Kids' stories are great, and our history as a nation is very complicated, and we need to balance that.
And I mean, I think the Parker Inheritance, it's a couple years old now, but I feel like it's even more relevant than it was maybe when it came out, especially in the wake of the Black Lives Matter movement and all of the demonstrations over the summer. I feel like this is a really good book to kind of get caught up on a lot of the racial tension and where it came from over the last 50, 60, 70 years, because it really gives you a very personalized view of how that happened. We follow characters who have to make choices based on the color of their skin and how other people perceive them. And so I think it's a really, really good way to learn about another's experience in a way that we don't often get from history books, right? We can read the history and learn quite a bit from it, but it's another thing to see characters live through that and have to make choices based on what's happening around them.
And then also because it's a middle grade, which is fantastic, it means that there's a good ending, it's a solid ending, and there's no ambivalence about the ending. So mystery solved, and you learn history, which is just the sweet spot of children's books.
And the main character is awesome. Candace is a wonderful person, and I love her, and I love Brandon, the other main character, to death. They're exceptional children. They're smarter than I am. I couldn't have solved this mystery if I had wanted to at their age. And the decisions they make at the end of the book are exceptional. I mean, they're upstanding kids, and it's really fun to read about them and their adventures.
Like, that was such an incredible history there that, like, for me, it was the major part of the book.
There's an intensity to the historical chapters that's just exceptional. I mean, Varian Johnson does an excellent job with the whole book. An immediacy and an intensity to the historical sections that are exactly like you're saying, Rosie. They stand out in a way that's just supremely amazing. I can envision lots of bits and pieces of this book, but I can envision every moment of the historical bits because they're stunning.
They stuck for me. I mean, potentially spoilers, but just that tennis game. Like, just every bit of, and then what was it? The policeman, the sheriff. It was like, well, you could make this choice.
Yeah.
What choice do you want to make? And what choice has I made? Just incredible, incredibly.
And I mean, and like just the ends up being, do you want to pass as a white person and kind of flee the potential crime? There isn't actually a crime. Or do you want to stay where you are, marry the woman you love, and be happy for that kind of fleeting moment, but probably be lynched? I mean, that's the kind of subtext is.
That for me was a moment where I was like, adults need to read this book because like a kid's going to read it and either they're going to have questions or they'll know just something bad could have happened.
Yeah.
And an adult should be reading that book to also go like, oh God, I know what could have happened or what probably would happen if he had made that choice. So if you read the book with the kid, then you end up going, oh, this is the questions they're going to have. And this is what I need to learn how to answer. Which
and I think, like you're saying, I think it really facilitates some really, really good conversations about the experiences of people of color in this country. And it does so in a way that impressively, I don't think it'll frighten children, right? I think it'll inform them, and I think it'll help them understand, but I don't think it will scare them. And I think that that is a really amazing ability of Varian Johnson, to be able to kind of talk about these things in a way that is not scary, but is very informative and very, it kind of encourages you to look into it more and to learn more. So
It does. It helps a lot. Like it's not a book that I would ever say is easy, but it's not a book that is going to be so hard that it's not enjoyable. That's a key, that it's really fun. It's a fun book.
And I think it's really important that the author doesn't ever use the N-word, doesn't really show a whole lot of violence, and is still able to convey the kind of disastrous effects. It's really impressive the way that he can kind of display a lot of this without, causing that harm to happen to the children and the people reading the book.
So we think that you should get this book. You should get it for you, but you should also get it for any kid in your life. Just a really good gift in general.
We'll have more of these little videos coming out where we talk about one, maybe two books that we think you need to add to your collection. And we hope that you find a new favorite book.